Listen up, people. That's right. It's time to listen to the sparks of bliss in your life. I'm your host and life coach, Caroline de Posada from Miami, Florida. And this podcast is an invitation to join me in upgrading our mindset, wellness, and relationships so that together we create a life that unlocks our bliss. Join me each week as we explore practical strategies, inspiring stories, and the moments of clarity, or as we like to call them, los momenticos, that make the world a little more magical. Consider this your weekly dose of wisdom in your pocket. Are you ready? Let's do this.
Hey, Bliss'ners, welcome to episode number 41 of Bliss'n Up. So I have to tell you, I have really struggled with recording this week's podcast episode. For the last few weeks, I've been on a roll. I've just had all these stories I've wanted to share, and I've been in a flow with the podcast, and everything has been going really well. And then suddenly I caught myself this week struggling with a little bit of podcast block. You know how they say we have writer's block? Well, I had a little bit of podcast block. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to share. Well, I had some things in mind that didn't work out, and it was just a little bit of a process, and I caught myself procrastinating a little bit. And then I've had, a pretty busy week. I celebrated my son's birthday this week. We had unfortunately a death in the family this week with one of our cousins, my husband's cousin, which we've been so sad about. There's just been all these things that have happened. And because of all of that, the days kind of crept up on me, and I found myself in a position that I've been in before, but I have been trying to avoid and delete from my personality altogether, right? I've talked a lot in this podcast about how in the past I used to have a little bit of a fire drill personality, and I would do things last minute, and I would procrastinate, and then I would rush at the end, and I would always I would get things done, but I was really stepping into an identity where I am efficient and I'm effective and I have good time management and I do things well in advance, and everything is streamlined and more simple and just not fire drill-ish. And here I am recording this podcast later than I want to, and finding myself feeling some of those old feelings. And here's the thing. I'm really glad that this is happening, because this is actually the best thing that I can share with you today in this podcast, because this happens to everyone. It happens to all of us. When you are trying to adopt a new habit, a new routine, a new lifestyle, when you're really stepping into a new identity, there are going to be moments where you feel that you are in flow and you're doing a really good job. And then there are going to be relapses. There are going to be moments where circumstances get in your way, where you fall off track, where you have a lull, where maybe just you can't hold the energy for too long. And then you have to work through that. And what I've noticed, because this has happened to me a lot with my clients, I'll have a client that tells me, it's for whatever it is, whether this person is working on adopting an exercise habit or they're working on their marriage. I hear a lot of the same things, which is, things were going really well, and then we had a hiccup. I missed my alarm and I didn't get to the gym, or I got really busy at work and I missed 2 days and now I feel like everything's falling apart. Or, my husband and I were getting along pretty well, and then he did this thing and it triggered me and we're back to where we started. And I see this pattern a lot. We have interruptions to our flow. We don't just decide today I'm going to adopt a new identity, and then it's just seamless and you never look back and you never have a hiccup. That's not the way that life works. But I've also witnessed how different people react differently to those hiccups. There's different strategies that you can use to deal with that hiccup. So I'm going to share with you my strategies of dealing with this and how I get through it in hopes that it can help you get through the hiccups in your life when you feel that you are falling off the routine, or where you're in a lull, or where your vibration just couldn't hold the momentum that you were trying to keep up. That's the game changer. The biggest mindset block that people face in these kinds of situations is the all or nothing mentality. I'm either all in or I'm out. This is what causes so many people to give up on trying to improve, give up on trying to achieve the result that they're trying to achieve, whether it's in weight loss, or it's in their marriage, or it's in launching a business. When we feel like we almost had it, and then we revert back to our own ways, the programming is often, I'm never going to change. I'm not good at this. I'm a failure. I should have done better. I should have known better. I should be better. And I'm not. And then because of that, it's just easier to stay in our old ways, in our old life, in our old patterns, or to just give up altogether and resign ourselves to being miserable about this thing. And I really don't want that to happen to you. So the first strategy in coping with this kind of situation is to understand and acknowledge that you are not a robot. You're not a robot. You are a human being, and with that comes emotions and temperament and seasons and circumstances and influences and life, and things come at you. And although in theory we would love to be able to just flip a switch and always operate in exactly the same way, this is part of the human experience, to be able to play with different emotions and do different things and learn from each of those things. So step number one is accepting I am not a robot. With this podcast thing, I've been doing really great at not procrastinating the podcast. And this week I cut myself some slack and I was like, I'm not a robot, and this week it's been a little tougher. So I'm going to record a little bit later and everything's going to be okay. But the one thing I'm not going to do is not record the podcast or give up on the podcast. I'm simply just going to work a little last minute if I have to work a little last minute, and be a little bit of a fire drill if I have to be a little bit of a fire drill, and do better next week. So that's step number one. Step number two is acknowledging the process that you've made so far. So in my case, I've been looking back and I'm like, hey, this is the first time that I haven't turned in my podcast timely in weeks. I'd been doing really, really good with the podcast for multiple weeks. I've been doing great, and I've really enjoyed that. So yes, this week I had a hiccup, but I also love the version of me that records in a timely manner. So I'm going to do my best to not let this happen again. And I'm going to start stretching it out. Acknowledging the progress is one of the most important things that you can do in anything in your life. I'm going to give you another tangible example, which is a really important one. So one of the couples that I work with, they have a pattern of arguing a lot, and the husband tends to be very explosive. So he has an explosive personality. And as we've been doing the work together, he's really been making an effort to be less explosive, to be more peaceful, to measure his words, to take a deep breath before he shares what he feels. He's been doing the work, and things have been better. So him and his wife have been arguing less. They've been getting along better, and this has been going on. They have been in a much better flow. And then they had an argument and he blew up. And the wife calls and she says, "Oh, you see, he's never going to change. He's back to square one. He's the same person he's always been." And she was very triggered by the fact that he got angry and he maybe said something he shouldn't have said or whatever. But when we looked at the trajectory of how they've been getting along, this was the first time that he'd blown up in a long time, where it used to be a very regular pattern. Now, this happened like once in, 3 months. And all of a sudden, we were able to acknowledge the progress. Was it wrong that he blew up? Yes. Does he have to work on it? Yes. Can he do better? Yes. But by acknowledging the progress of how well he's been doing and how much less they've been arguing, they both were able to rebound and recover from that argument much quicker and much better. Instead of focusing on, this is a failed effort and he's never going to change, and a zebra can't change their stripes, all the kind of the programming that we have in our brains, by looking at it and saying, wow, we've had a couple of months of just we've been really working together. We've been really patient with each other. He's been really putting an effort. I'm going to cut him some slack. I'm going to be a little more graceful. I'm going to forgive him a little quicker. He's going to apologize quicker. He's going to bounce back quicker. And next time, maybe it'll be, 6 months before he blows up, and hopefully it'll get to the point where he never blows up again. But the idea is that you acknowledge the progress along the way. And then the third step is to use the current situation as information and use it to connect the dots into leading you to the identity you want to adopt, into the lifestyle you want, into the habits that you want. So, for example, let's say you've been cleaning up your diet and you've been eating a lot healthier and you've been reducing your alcohol intake and eating more whole foods and really trying to clean things up. And then all of a sudden you go out one night and you indulge with your friends and you just kind of throw out, the baby with the bathwater, and you kind of overindulge and you drink too much or you eat too much or whatever, you fall off your clean habit. One of the things that you get to do is look at that and use it as information. How do you feel when you wake up the next morning? How do you feel after you ate it? Did you feel bloated? Did you feel gross? Did you feel like, I'm sluggish after I ate like that? I don't like that when I overindulge that way. Maybe you get some other information from it. Like, it's okay to have an indulgence once in a while and I'm okay with it. Like, it doesn't make or break my circumstances. And that's good information to have. I was talking today with a friend of mine. We were talking about eating healthy specifically, and how she was saying she does not like having a very rigid lifestyle. She likes having, she likes to be able to indulge every once in a while. So she eats really clean, she eats very healthy, and she measures her food. But if she wants to have cake, or she wants to have a dessert or something like that, she's not going to prohibit herself from having that. And I think that's absolutely wonderful because she's found a rhythm that works for her. In my case, when I first started eating healthy many years ago, I think this was in 2011, I was a total junk food addict, like a total junk food addict. So for me, moderation and balance and the occasional indulgence did not work. The reason it did not work was because every time that I had an indulgence, my brain immediately started craving that food all the time again. I had not developed a love of eating healthy. So I had to be stricter than other people, and I had to be way more extreme because I knew that I had to rewire my brain. I had to change the way that I thought about food. I had to change how I reacted. So whenever I would have a relapse and I would eat something that I wasn't supposed to eat, I would notice that it was harder for me to keep eating clean. So then I cleaned it up and I went really, 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 really extreme. I used that information to my benefit. But this is what's interesting. Even though I had cleaned things up, I had started to enjoy eating healthy, I had changed tremendously. There was still something in the little back of my head that I would feel once in a while like, oh, I would kill for chicken sandwich with cheese combo from Burger King, right? I would love to have a chicken sandwich with cheese combo from Burger King. And I had that inkling in my head, but I had really cleaned things up and I had really just been extreme and I wasn't making any exceptions. So I wouldn't have it. I would never have it. I would never have it. And eventually one random day, it'd been months. I mean, who knows, maybe years. I don't even remember. It would have been a long time that I hadn't had that Burger King, and my father was having surgery. He was having a open heart surgery and I was a mess. And right across the street from the hospital, there was a Burger King. And I remember I was talking to my cousin and I was like, all I want is the chicken sandwich with cheese combo from Burger King. And I was upset about my dad and I just wanted that comfort food. And my cousin was like, Caro, just go eat the freaking chicken sandwich with cheese combo. Who cares? You've been eating healthy for so long. You're doing great. You haven't cheated in forever. Just go and eat whatever you want. And I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to treat myself. And I went through the drive-thru and I bought the chicken sandwich with cheese. And I did acknowledge at the time, I was like, man, it's been a long time. So I acknowledged the progress. And I was like, this is not all or nothing. I'm just going to have this one time. But when I ate it, it gave me a stomach ache. It was greasy. It wasn't nearly as good as I remembered, like at all. And I used that information and I was like, oh, I am different. I don't need this anymore. I have become addicted to my healthy lifestyle. I love eating clean. I love the way that I live. I don't need this. So that was the last time that I ever had Burger King. I never needed it again. I was able to let it go at that time because I took that information and I realized I was a different person already. I had upgraded my identity into eating cleaner and I didn't need that. And then fast forward, now I can be like my friend. I can have an indulgence from time to time. I can have, I had a muffin for breakfast the other day, which I did not like how I felt after that. So I took that information as well. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have to clean things up. But I can indulge. I can have a dessert. I can make exceptions because overall my lifestyle is pretty healthy and pretty clean, which keeps me on track because my identity has changed. And I think it's really important when we talk about identities and things like that. It's really important to realize that there's a gap between like where you're at, what your habits are, what your patterns are, what your lifestyle is, what your thoughts are, what your like everything you are right now. And if you're trying to achieve like a certain result, everything you are going to become, there's a transition. There's a gap in between that. And in that transition, you're going to have these moments where you revert. You kind of go backwards or the same thing rises up in you. And sometimes this could be a process that takes many, many, many years to overcome. Like there are certain things in our life. This happens with grief. I've noticed this a lot with grief. Let's say you have a death in the family or you have a traumatic event in your life. At first, grief consumes you. It takes over you. It's everything. It's everything you can think about. It's everything that you live and you breathe is the grief that you're experiencing, the change you're experiencing. But eventually, you start getting better. You start feeling better. You start moving on with your life. You start focusing on other things. You start finding joy in different ways. And then comes an anniversary of the date and you are in bed all day, or you find yourself sick that weekend and you don't know what it came out of nowhere, or all of a sudden you feel like you've been in a funk and you don't know why you're in such a bad mood lately, and then you look at the calendar and you realize it's the anniversary, and you could blame yourself and say, oh my God, I can't believe, I should be over this, I should be better, this should not be happening to me. Or you can acknowledge that you are not a robot. You can acknowledge your progress. Say, man, I've come a long way. I've really found myself again. I've really healed a lot from this. But this is a moment, and then you can use it as information. What is the information that this is telling you? Where can you connect the dots? How can you use this to reevaluate, to see where you're at, to acknowledge how far you've come, to maybe remember whatever that information is for you? It's important. Oftentimes we need these hiccups to really be able to celebrate our growth and our progress. We need these hiccups to realize how much we've changed along the way. And then maybe the hiccups start to go away. And maybe you'll never face that particular issue again, but there will be others. So for me, I've never gone back to Burger King. It's not an issue I've ever had to face again. But here I am facing the fire drill issue. I'm working on it. I'm improving. I'm progressing. I've done a lot. I've been in flow. And then today, I'm recording my podcast a little bit late. And I was struggling a little bit with not having content for the podcast for a couple of days and not sure exactly what I was going to say here today. So it was a hiccup, but I'm acknowledging it. I'm not a robot. I'm a human being. You know, not every single week I'm going to have perfect flow with a podcast. I'm acknowledging my progress. I'm on episode 41. I've done a pretty good job. I'm showing up consistently every single week. And even though it's a little later than usual that I'm recording, it's still going to come out on Sacred Sunday at 6 a.m. so that I can honor my word and my commitment, because I take myself seriously and I take this work seriously and I take you seriously. And I'm connecting the dots and using this as information. For me, it was the information I needed to record the podcast, to understand that we all go through this, that this is a process for everybody, and that there's something for us to learn here. So hopefully this will serve you. I will leave you with this one little thought. If you've ever read the book, Wild Robot, I read that book to my kids a few years ago. We absolutely loved it. Now there's a movie. I encourage you to read the book and then watch the movie. The movie was phenomenal, but the book is the book, you know. So I read this book with my kids, and I remember there was a part where Roz is the robot, the little duckling, which now I can't remember his name, but Roz's kid, which is the little duckling, he noticed that Roz had a button in the back of her head, and he was very curious to know what would happen if he would press the button. And Roz let him do it. She was like, go ahead, we'll press the button and see what happens. So he presses the button and Roz shuts down. She goes to sleep completely, like the robot shuts down. And then he resets the button. And when he resets the button, at first, it goes back to its factory settings. And Roz isn't Roz anymore. Roz is just another robot. And the duckling is absolutely devastated. And he's like, I killed my mom. I lost my mom. Where is my mom? But after a few minutes, the software starts to update and Roz starts to gain her memory back. And before you know it, she's back with all the knowledge that she had gained, with all the progress, still being the little duckling's mom. And that's when they realized she was no regular robot. She had adopted some human in her. There was some human in her. There was something special about her, because this robot wasn't like other robots. It didn't just go to its factory settings and that's it. It came back to life. Well, that's exactly what we do in our lives. Sometimes we reset to our factory settings. Sometimes we shut down. And sometimes it takes us a little while to remember everything we've learned and all the tools we have in our toolbox and all the skills we've adopted along the way. And it takes us a little bit to remember that we are upgrading our identity always, and we're becoming better and better and better versions of ourselves. But stay in the game, because if you just give it a little minute, if you just acknowledge it, if you just go back into your database and remember and use the information and connect the dots, you will get back to where you are. And you'll realize that even though you had a hiccup, and maybe you'll consider that a little bit of a failure, you're always failing forward. And you're not failing like the person that failed 6 months ago. You're not failing like the older version of you. You are a new version of you. So this hiccup is different than it was before. Even though it's a hiccup, it's still better than it was before. So take that with you and keep going forward. And in this human journey, we're going to continue growing and evolving and upgrading and always striving to be the best version of ourselves. Happy Sacred Sunday. I'll see you guys next week. That's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for being here. I am deeply, deeply grateful for this time to connect. If you're loving this podcast, I'd love if you could support me by subscribing, rating, and or leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Those reviews help us so much. And if you know of someone who could really use a voice like mine in their head, please share this with them and let them know how much you care about their bliss. Now, if you are feeling called to dig deeper and really work on elevating your mindset, wellness, and your relationships to create a healthier, happier, and more meaningful life, then I invite you to schedule a 60-minute complimentary consultation with me. Let's have a meaningful conversation and see if working together is in our future. You can find the link to the calendar of consults right there in my show notes, but you can also connect with me on my website, carolinedeposada.com, or just send me a DM on Instagram at Caroline de Posada. Like my friend always says, the project is big and you're a part of it. So thanks for being here.